My sister-in-law tried to destroy my wedding, but karma hit her so hard, she lost everything in front of 200 guests. What happened next will leave you speechless. This is the story of how one woman's jealousy backfired in the most devastating way possible. I'm 27 years old, and I thought I'd seen everything when it comes to family drama. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what my sister-in-law would do on my wedding day. Let me start from the beginning. My husband's name is Ryan, and his sister, let's call her Jessica, has been a nightmare from day one. But before I dive into the chaos she created, you need to understand the twisted family dynamics that shaped this disaster. Ryan is the eldest child in his family. His parents immigrated from Korea when he was just a baby, and 3 years later, Jessica came along. From the moment she could walk, their parents made it crystal clear who the favorite was, and it wasn't Ryan. See, Ryan's parents had this obsession with academic perfection. They demanded straight A's, perfect test scores, and complete dedication to studying. But Ryan? He was different. He was athletic, spent hours perfecting his basketball shots, and had this incredible talent for music. He could play guitar like nobody's business and even wrote his own songs. But his parents saw his passions as distractions. They'd yell at him for practicing guitar instead of studying calculus. They'd ground him for staying after school for basketball practice. In their eyes, anything that wasn't academics was a complete waste of time. Jessica, on the other hand, she was their golden child. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect everything. She lived and breathed textbooks, and their parents showered her with praise, gifts, and attention. The comparison was constant and brutal. Ryan would bring home a B+, and his parents would lecture him about how Jessica never got anything below an A. When Jessica got accepted into honor society, they threw her a party. When Ryan made varsity basketball, they barely acknowledged it. But here's where it gets really heartbreaking. Ryan told me stories that still make my blood boil. Like when Jessica got a brand new car for her 16th birthday, complete with a bow on top and a celebration dinner. But when Ryan turned 16, his parents told him he needed to earn a car by improving his grades. He never got one. Or the birthday parties. Jessica would get these elaborate celebrations with all her friends, decorations, expensive gifts. Ryan would get a grocery store cake if he was lucky, and his parents would spend the entire time telling him how he needed to be more like his sister. The worst part? Jessica loved every second of it. She'd smirk when their parents praised her in front of Ryan. She'd make little comments about how she was the smart one, and he was just the jock. She had zero respect for him as her older brother, and honestly, that disrespect never went away. When college time came around, their parents dropped a bombshell that shattered Ryan's world. They sat both kids down and announced they could only afford to pay for one college tuition, and they'd chosen Jessica. Ryan was devastated. He'd worked so hard, maintained decent grades despite their constant criticism, and had even gotten recruited by several colleges for basketball. But none of that mattered. Jessica was their investment, and Ryan was expected to figure it out on his own. The fight that followed was nuclear. Ryan finally exploded, years of resentment pouring out as he confronted his parents about their blatant favoritism. He asked them why they even had him if they were just going to treat him like a second-class citizen in his own family. Their response? They told him it was time to grow up and make sacrifices for his sister's future.
And Jessica?
She stood there with this smug expression and told Ryan he was clearly the less intelligent one, so he should just accept it and move on. That was the moment Ryan realized his family would never change. So when he got accepted to a great computer science program with a full scholarship, he made a decision that would define the next chapter of his life. He moved out, went low contact, and built his own future. His parents didn't even help him move into his dorm. Can you imagine? Your own son leaving for college, and you can't even be bothered to drive him there or help him carry his boxes. It breaks my heart every time I think about it. For years, Ryan kept his distance. He'd take their calls occasionally, but conversations were brief and surface level. When he graduated summa cum laude, his parents wanted to attend the ceremony. But Ryan told them no. He reminded them that they hadn't invested in his education, so they didn't get to celebrate his achievements. Now, let me tell you about myself. I'm a marketing director at a tech startup, and I have my MBA from Northwestern. Unlike Ryan's parents, mine were incredibly supportive. I'm an only child, so I never had to compete for attention or affection. My parents are both professors, and they always encouraged me to pursue my passions while maintaining academic excellence. I met Ryan at a networking event in downtown Chicago. He was representing his company, and I was there for mine. We kept running into each other at different sessions, and there was this immediate chemistry. Ryan was charming, intelligent, and had this quiet confidence that was incredibly attractive. But what really won me over was his kindness. He'd remember little things I mentioned, like my favorite coffee shop or how I was stressed about a big presentation. He'd show up with my favorite latte or send encouraging texts. He's the type of guy who brings me flowers every Friday, cooks my favorite meals when I've had a rough day, and isn't afraid to tell me he loves me. When we decided to move in together after a year of dating, I discovered just how amazing he was as a partner. He's more organized than I am, does his fair share of housework, and we have this perfect system where we split responsibilities based on our strengths. If he cooks, I clean. If I do laundry, he folds. It's the kind of partnership my friends are jealous of. When it came time to meet each other's families, Ryan was honest about his complicated relationship with his parents. He explained the years of favoritism, the way they treated him, and why he'd chosen to maintain distance. But he also admitted he missed having a family connection, and meeting me had made him want to try again. So he reached out to his parents and told them about me. Their reaction was interesting. They were thrilled to hear from him and immediately wanted to meet me. We arranged a lunch at this upscale restaurant downtown, and I was nervous as hell. But Ryan's parents were surprisingly warm. When they learned about my educational background and career, they became even more friendly. I could tell they were impressed, and honestly, I didn't mind. I wanted them to like me, and I could see how much it meant to Ryan to have his parents' approval for once. The lunch was going beautifully. His parents were asking thoughtful questions about my work, sharing stories about their own careers, and even awkwardly apologizing to Ryan for their past behavior. They admitted they'd been thinking about their mistakes and wanted to rebuild their relationship with him. But then Jessica showed up. Ryan had no idea she was coming. His parents had invited her without telling us, claiming they thought it would be the perfect opportunity for the family to move forward together. The moment she walked in, the entire atmosphere changed. Jessica gave me a fake hug and completely ignored Ryan. Didn't say hello, didn't acknowledge his presence, nothing. It was like he was invisible to her. When Ryan's parents started bragging about my MBA and my job, Jessica's demeanor shifted entirely. She started asking pointed questions about my work, then began making subtle digs about how marketing was manipulative and how tech companies were destroying society. At one point, she actually asked me how I felt about brainwashing consumers. I was stunned. She was clearly trying to make me look bad in front of her parents, and she couldn't handle the fact that they were giving me positive attention. The passive-aggressive comments continued throughout lunch. She'd contradict everything I said, no matter how mundane. If I mentioned liking Italian food, she'd launch into a speech about how Italian restaurants were overpriced. If I talked about enjoying hiking, she'd complain about how hikers were ruining natural environments. But the real drama happened when the bill came. Ryan's dad wanted to pay, but Ryan insisted on covering it. Out of nowhere, Jessica interrupted and said I should pay since everyone was there, because of me. She made this snide comment about how I was probably making good money, so I should put to good use. I was shocked, not just by the audacity, but by the clear attempt to embarrass me in front of his parents. Thankfully, they immediately shut her down, telling her she was being incredibly rude to a guest. Jessica didn't like being called out. She got up from the table and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving us all sitting there in awkward silence. Ryan's parents apologized profusely, making excuses about how Jessica takes time to warm up to new people. I decided to let it go for Ryan's sake, thinking I'd probably never have to deal with her again anyway. But I was wrong. So very wrong. Over the next few months, I started noticing something weird. Jessica was always the first person to view my Instagram stories. Every single day, without fail, she'd watch them within minutes of me posting. But she never liked them, never commented, never followed me. She was just watching. Ryan's parents started inviting us to family dinners more regularly, and Jessica would always find an excuse not to come. But she could see all the photos we'd share in the family group chat, and I could tell it was eating at her. Then came the Facebook incident that really showed her true colors. She sent a link to our family group chat with a message asking if this was me. I clicked it, and my heart sank. It was an old photo from my high school days with my ex-boyfriend, Tom. We were just hugging at some school event, and he'd posted it years ago when we were dating. I have no idea how she found it or why she'd send it to the group, but I wasn't going to lie about it. I confirmed it was me, and that Tom was an old boyfriend. Jessica immediately responded, saying I looked awfully cozy, and that I should ask my ex to remove the photo since it was inappropriate now that I was in a serious relationship. I couldn't believe what I was reading. She'd stalked my social media so thoroughly that she'd ended up on my ex-boyfriend's page, found a harmless photo from years ago, and was now trying to shame me for it in front of Ryan's parents. Thankfully, Ryan jumped in and told her she was being ridiculous. He said it was a completely normal photo, and he had no problem with it. But Jessica couldn't let it go. She replied with this passive-aggressive comment about how Ryan should date someone with better standards. That's when Ryan had enough. He messaged back that he did have great standards, which is why he was with someone who earned 4 times her salary. I know that was harsh, but Jessica had been pushing and pushing, and Ryan finally snapped. The truth was, she worked as a freelance graphic designer and barely made enough to cover her expenses. She was still living with her parents at 23, and I think that ate at her. Jessica immediately left the group chat, then called Ryan screaming and crying about how he'd humiliated her. But Ryan didn't care anymore. He was done with her behavior. His parents called us that evening to apologize. They said they'd talked to Jessica and that she'd promised to be more respectful moving forward. It was awkward having to discuss my ex-boyfriend with my future in-laws, but I appreciated their support. After that incident, Jessica disappeared from our lives. She never rejoined the group chat, stopped viewing my social media, and avoided family gatherings. For a few months, it was peaceful. Then we got shocking news. Jessica had eloped with some guy named David and gotten married in Vegas. Ryan's parents were devastated. They had no idea she'd even been dating anyone, let alone someone serious enough to marry. Through some social media detective work, Ryan discovered that David was 15 years older than Jessica and had recently gotten divorced. Apparently, Jessica had been having an affair with him while he was still married, which led to his divorce. She'd kept the entire relationship secret because she knew her parents would never approve of her marrying an older divorced man, especially one she'd met through an affair. Part of me was happy for her, thinking maybe marriage would mellow her out. But I was also wary. Jessica had a pattern of destructive behavior, and I doubted a wedding ring would change that. A few weeks after her elopement, I got a text from her that made my blood run cold. I know I haven't been the best sister-in-law, and I want to apologize. I realize I was wrong to judge you, and I'd like to start over. Would you and Ryan like to come to dinner this weekend? I want to get to know you better. I showed the message to Ryan, and he was immediately suspicious. But I thought maybe, just maybe, she was genuinely trying to change. Against his better judgment, I convinced him to give her a chance. When we arrived at Jessica and David's house, she was all smiles and warmth. David seemed like a decent guy, much more mature than his wife, and he gave us a tour of their beautiful home. It was clear he had money, and Jessica was enjoying the lifestyle upgrade. While the men talked, Jessica and I sat down to chat. She apologized for her previous behavior and explained that she'd been jealous of how I'd changed Ryan. She said seeing him happy and confident had made her realize how much she'd missed having a relationship with her brother. I accepted her apology and told her I was glad we could move past everything. But then the conversation took a weird turn. Jessica started bragging about David's wealth, his cars, his investments, how she'd never have to work again. She was clearly trying to make me jealous, but it just came across as insecure and materialistic. When I mentioned my recent promotion and how much I loved my job, she quickly changed the subject and started asking invasive personal questions. So, when are you and Ryan getting married? she asked with this fake sweet smile. I told her we discussed it but weren't in any rush. We were happy with how things were going and believed in letting things happen naturally. Jessica scoffed and said that was complete nonsense. She told me I needed to push Ryan to propose before I got too old to have children. I laughed and explained that Ryan and I didn't want kids. We were perfectly happy with our life as it was. Jessica's eyes went wide with shock. She started lecturing me about how it was a woman's duty to have children and asked why I was even with Ryan if I didn't want to give him a family. I was getting irritated with her invasive questions and told her that Ryan and I were adults who could make our own decisions about our future. That's when she lost it. Jessica started yelling for Ryan, and when he and David came running, she demanded that Ryan confirm whether he knew he was planning to marry someone who had no interest in continuing his bloodline. Ryan laughed at her dramatic phrasing and asked if she realized how ridiculous she sounded. But Jessica was just getting started. She threatened to tell their parents about my stance on children, claiming they'd never allow the marriage to happen. Ryan exploded. He told her that no one could stop him from marrying me and that her narcissistic, controlling behavior was exactly why he'd gone low contact with the family in the first place. The argument escalated quickly, and I finally asked Ryan if we could leave. David apologized repeatedly, while Jessica stood there glaring at me like I'd personally ruined her life. In the car, I broke down crying. I asked Ryan if he was sure about not wanting children, worried that Jessica's words had planted some seed of doubt. But Ryan was amazing. He assured me that he'd never wanted kids and that I shouldn't let Jessica's backward thinking mess with my head. He told me that if he'd wanted anything different, he wouldn't be with me in the first place. I felt better after that conversation, but I also made a decision. I blocked Jessica on all social media platforms. I was done with her games and her attempts to sabotage my relationship. 6 months later, Ryan proposed to me at our favorite restaurant, the same place where we'd had our first date. It was perfect, romantic, and everything I dreamed of. Our families were thrilled. My parents immediately started helping with wedding planning, and Ryan's parents were over the moon. They'd been hoping for this moment and couldn't wait to officially welcome me into the family. Jessica found out about the engagement through her parents and sent Ryan a single text, "I hope you know what you're doing." Even then, she couldn't just be happy for her brother. But I tried not to let her negativity affect our wedding planning. We had a beautiful venue, amazing vendors, and 200 guests who were genuinely excited to celebrate with us. 2 months before the wedding, something happened that would change everything. I was feeling under the weather with a headache, so I decided to make Ryan's favorite comfort food, chicken Alfredo. But we were missing a few ingredients, so I headed to the grocery store. The first store didn't have everything I needed, so I drove to another one across town. As I was walking through the shopping center, I passed by a little cafe and stopped dead in my tracks. There was Jessica holding hands and kissing some guy who definitely wasn't David. At first, I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but when I looked closer, I could see it was definitely her. She was with this younger guy, probably around her age, and they were acting like teenagers in love. They were completely wrapped up in each other, laughing and being affectionate in a way that made it clear this wasn't just a friendly meeting. I was in shock. As far as I knew, Jessica was happily married to David. If they'd separated, Ryan's parents would have definitely told us. Without really thinking about it, I took a few photos with my phone. I needed proof of what I was seeing because I knew no one would believe me otherwise. Jessica never even noticed me. She was too busy with her mystery man. When I got home, my hands were shaking. Ryan immediately knew something was wrong and asked what had happened. I showed him the photos and explained what I'd witnessed. He was just as shocked as I was and made me confirm multiple times that I was sure about what I'd seen. We debated whether to tell David about what I'd witnessed. On one hand, he deserved to know his wife was cheating. On the other hand, we didn't want to get involved in Jessica's drama. But Ryan made a good point. If someone was cheating on me, he'd want to know. So we decided he'd reach out to David privately and let him know what we'd discovered. The conversation didn't go well for Jessica. David was devastated to learn about the affair, but he was grateful that Ryan had told him. He'd apparently been suspicious about Jessica's behavior lately, but hadn't wanted to believe she was capable of cheating. But here's where the story gets even more twisted. David told Ryan that Jessica was pregnant. Yes, pregnant. They'd just found out, and she'd been waiting for the right time to announce it to the family. David was now questioning whether the baby was even his, given the timeline of her affair. He asked us not to say anything to Jessica about what we knew, promising he'd handle the situation himself. We agreed to stay out of it, but I couldn't stop thinking about the chaos that was about to unfold. Our wedding was just a week away when Ryan's parents asked us to invite Jessica. They said it would look bad if she wasn't there, and they wanted to present a united family front. Reluctantly, we agreed, but I made them promise to talk to Jessica and ensure she wouldn't cause any drama. They assured us they'd handle it. The wedding day arrived, and everything was perfect. The ceremony was beautiful, our families were happy, and we moved into the reception feeling like we were floating on air. My parents gave a touching speech about how proud they were of me. Ryan's dad spoke about how grateful he was that I'd brought the family closer together. It was everything we'd dreamed of. But out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Jessica trying to grab the microphone from Ryan's dad. Given her history of causing scenes, I wasn't taking any chances. I'd already briefed my bridesmaids to signal the DJ to cut the mic if Jessica tried to speak. When she attempted to take the microphone, she quickly realized her voice wasn't projecting. She looked around confused while my maid of honor smoothly took the mic back and continued with the planned speeches. That's when Jessica realized we'd deliberately cut her off. She started screaming in the middle of my maid of honor's speech about how dare we not let her speak and how she had an important announcement to make. When she couldn't get the microphone, she climbed onto her chair and started shouting about how jealous I was of her and how I was such a control freak that I wouldn't let her speak at my own wedding. The 200 guests were staring in shock and confusion as Jessica announced that she was pregnant and felt this was the perfect time to share the news with all our loved ones gathered together. She was clearly expecting congratulations and applause, but instead, everyone just looked around awkwardly. Ryan's parents were mortified and whispered for her to sit down and stop embarrassing the family. But Jessica was just getting started. She turned to me and started yelling about how I was happy to destroy my own husband's family and called me a manipulative woman who had never deserved to marry her brother. Ryan had been trying to stay calm for my sake, but watching his sister ruin our wedding pushed him over the edge. He stood up looking like he was about to lose it completely. But before anyone could react, David, who had been sitting quietly beside Jessica, stood up and took the microphone. He apologized to us for Jessica's behavior and congratulated us on our wedding. Then he turned to Jessica and said he'd never wanted to do this publicly, but she'd forced his hand. Jessica looked confused as David announced that while it was true she was pregnant, he wasn't the father of the child. The crowd gasped. I cringed, knowing exactly where this was heading. David continued, saying that before Jessica worried about making announcements, she should figure out who the actual father was. Then he pulled out his phone and showed Ryan's parents photos of Jessica with her boyfriend. He explained that he'd become suspicious of her behavior and had hired a private investigator who documented her affair. Ryan's parents looked at the photos in disgust and horror, while our wedding guests whispered among themselves. Jessica sat there speechless, probably realizing her lies had finally caught up with her. Ryan seized the moment and told Jessica to leave our wedding immediately. He said he was embarrassed to be related to someone like her. Jessica burst into tears, grabbed her purse, and ran out of the reception hall. The rest of the evening was ruined. Instead of celebrating our marriage, all anyone could talk about was Jessica's affair and her pregnancy announcement. It was humiliating for us and for Ryan's parents, who had to face questions from relatives and friends about their daughter's behavior. But the story doesn't end there. Since the wedding, I've been receiving emails from random addresses that are clearly from Jessica. She's been sending me threatening messages, blaming me for her public humiliation and claiming that if I'd just let her make her pregnancy announcement, none of this would have happened. She's convinced that everything is my fault, that I orchestrated her downfall out of jealousy and spite. The emails are becoming more frequent and more aggressive, and Ryan and I are considering involving law enforcement. Ryan believes we did nothing wrong, that Jessica created her own mess through her choices and behavior. But part of me wonders if we could have handled things differently. Looking back, I can see the pattern of Jessica's behavior. The jealousy, the need for attention, the inability to let her brother be happy. She'd been building up to this moment for years, and our wedding just happened to be when everything exploded. But here's what I've learned from this experience. You can't fix people who don't want to be fixed. You can't love someone into being a better person. And sometimes, protecting your own peace and happiness means cutting toxic people out of your life, even when they're family. David has filed for divorce, and Ryan's parents have cut contact with Jessica completely. She's apparently staying with friends now, trying to figure out her next steps as a single mother with a baby whose father wants nothing to do with her. It's a tragic situation, but it's one entirely of her own making. Every choice she made, from the favoritism she enjoyed as a child to the affair that destroyed her marriage, led to this moment. Ryan and I are stronger than ever. We've learned that we can weather any storm as long as we face it together. Our families have rallied around us, and we're building the life we've always dreamed of. Sometimes the people who try hardest to destroy your happiness end up destroying themselves instead. Jessica spent so much energy trying to tear down my relationship with Ryan that she neglected her own marriage and made choices that cost her everything. Karma, as they say, is a powerful force. And sometimes, it works faster than you'd ever expect. The most important lesson I've learned is this: surround yourself with people who genuinely want to see you happy. Life is too short to waste on those who can't celebrate your success or support your dreams. Jessica thought she could manipulate and control her way to happiness, but real happiness comes from authentic relationships, personal growth, and making choices you can be proud of. As for me and Ryan, we're living our best life, focusing on our careers, our dreams, and each other. We've learned that the best revenge against toxic people isn't plotting or scheming. It's simply being happy despite their efforts to bring you down. What do you think about this story? Have you ever dealt with a toxic family member who couldn't handle your success? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more real-life drama and relationship stories.